You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am your host, Andre Hagverdian, and joined, as always, by Paul Garrison. In this episode, we're going to break down the early signing class for San Diego State's class of 2023. That included 18 signings, 14 from high school senior positions, 3 from junior college, and 1 an FCS transfer. So we'll get into that. Plus, we'll preview the Hawai'i Bowl that San Diego State will be playing against Middle Tennessee State University on Christmas Eve. But first up, we had a chance to catch up with one of those 18 new Aztecs, Brady Nassar. He is a defensive lineman from Pleasanton, California in the East Bay. He went to Amador Valley High School, had a monster year in his senior season, and looks to step onto the Mesa this summer as part of his freshman year, and to contribute to the team as soon as he can. We had a great time chatting with him and getting to know him, and I think he'll become a instant fan favorite for Aztec Nation. Take a listen. We want to welcome Brady Nassar to the podcast. How are you doing today, man?
Good. How are you guys?
We're doing great. We appreciate you taking the time. I know today was a big day. It was an early signing day for the class of 2023. You signed with San Diego State. So how does it feel to sign your national letter and become an Aztec?
It's awesome. It's like all the work I put in, all the time I put in away from the cameras or all that glit and glam, like it really pays off. It's pretty cool to see. And it's also kind of the end to this whirlwind of a recruiting thing and how it all in the business of it and how it all goes down. So it's a relief to be safe in a place where in a home, really. It's safe to be placed at home.
Yeah, you mentioned the business side of it and the recruitment. People who have followed, you committed to Colorado, I believe in June. They've had their share of publicity lately with Deion Sanders taking over, and there's been some articles about how a lot of the commitments, those scholarships weren't honored. So for you, when that plays out a couple of weeks ago and you've got to shift gears, how did you work on that, and how quickly did San Diego State pick back up?
Well, like the new coaching staff got hired, right? The announcement came out. I saw it on ESPN or whatever. I was like, oh, that's awesome. No call, no text for like 48 hours, 3 days maybe. And I get a phone call from one of the guys in the old staff, says, hey, yeah, we're not going to honor your scholarship. I was like, okay, let's see what's next. So I had to initially go to Twitter, announce the fact that I'm decommitting now and I'm open to new schools, and San Diego State's back on my phone. They were always there since day one, always calling me, always talking to me, always cared about me, always wanted me. So right away, Coach Anna called me, he said, hey, we want you. Remember, we always want you. I know you went to Colorado, but we still want you. So it was right away. And it was like they never left, and I loved it.
So who reached out to you?
Coach Anna, the D line coach.
Coach Anna. Yeah. I didn't catch the name. So, tell me about, like, with San Diego State, did the way that everything kind of transpired and went down at Colorado, did that help San Diego State to stand out for you in the process?
Yes, but it's only they didn't stand out before. Yes, it showed how human they were in kind of a dirty business. Like, a lot of these schools are playing it dirty or things that you wouldn't want to happen, but they have to happen, and they do it in ways that you don't want to happen, but they do. But San Diego State was always up front and always did it the right way and always was very kind to me and treated me well. So yeah, it helped me stand out in that way. But at the end of the day, SDSU has been my top school for, my dad and I talk about it all the time. They were top 3 the whole time. I think the issue was I went to a visit to Colorado, didn't go visit San Diego State, didn't see the school, didn't see anything, didn't meet the players. And I think that really sealed the deal for me to commit to Colorado early on.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of incoming players, and honesty is something that they constantly talk about with the staff. But you mentioned that you didn't get to visit San Diego State originally, but 2 weeks ago you went on your official visit. Could you just take us through that, and what were some of the highlights? Who hosted you, etc.
Well, I mean, first of all, it was amazing. I mean, it was one of the best visits I've been on. I think I've been on 4 now or 3. I love Craig Smith. That guy's awesome. That guy's my buddy. Coach Anna, amazing. Coach Hoke, amazing. The D coordinator, sorry, I forget his name. Amazing. I love his energy. That's what I want out of a coach, right? Just fired up. Go, 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 go. We got in the meeting room and they just went over everything about their defense and everything about the D line, how they want their D line to work. And I was jumping out of my chair. I wanted to go play right now. I was fired up. I was like just so ready to go play Aztec football. And like that's not even mentioning everyone knows like San Diego. Like you can't beat San Diego. So that was amazing. Then I went to go hang out with the players, and they're always great people. And they're happy to be there, and they win, right? It's like what more can you ask for in life, right? So I mean, all around it was amazing. It showed me like what San Diego State football is, and there's not much that they don't have.
Was a stadium tour part of that official visit?
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, I'm up here by Levi, and I've been here a few times, Levi, and what I felt like there was like that's a smaller version of what Levi Stadium is.
Awesome. Just watching your high school tape, you're a defensive lineman. A lot of times you were standing up in high school. Do you see yourself being more as a defensive lineman, a defensive end with the hand on the ground? Do you see yourself standing up? Is that something you've talked to with the coaches? By the defensive coordinator is Kurt Maddox, and I can talk to him, talk about defense like 24 hours a day. That's how knowledgeable he is. But what have those conversations about positional fit been like?
Well, as you guys know, I mean, the defense it's very hybrid. It's different. Like it's not what you see on those other schools. So, I mean, I want to play to help the team win. So if that requires me to slide into the 3, go back out to the 9, play in the 1 tech, like wherever they want me, wherever I'm best set up to make the biggest plays in the game, put me there, right? So, I mean, I don't have a preference, to be honest. I still play football, right? I'm down. I'm okay with being down in the trenches in the 1 tech. I'm okay with being out wide in the 9 tech. So whatever they want me to do, whatever they think's best for me, I'll do.
For people who have not seen you play, how would you describe your game?
I think I'm very good at speed and power, right? So I have the speed to beat you on the edge, but I also have the power to run through your chest. And it's very helpful to set up an O lineman all game, like going speed, then boom, power. And they're not expecting it. They don't expect it because they're playing the speed so hard because they have to respect my speed. And along with that, my run defense, I think, is pretty solid. And I'm really excited because now that when you're in college, you don't have to play 140 plays or 20 plays a game like I was playing in high school. So I'm expecting a higher motor than I've had these last few years. Even though I've had a pretty good motor, but to my standards, it's slow. So I'm excited to get in this college thing and just play defense the whole time and even rotate on defense, which I didn't even do in high school. So I think it's gonna be helpful for me just like from an energy standpoint. Like I have more juice than I've had ever before, which I'm excited to see what I can do with it.
So when is it that you're planning to enroll, and between now and then, what are some things that you're paying attention to and trying to work on to, get yourself off to the best footing?
Well, I'm enrolling in June. I wish I thought about this early enrollment earlier, but it's too late for me now to make up those credits and graduate early. They're sending me the playbook soon, actually, the defense playbook to work on the fronts and everything. They want me to play early, so I'm going to study up on that. I think really just getting my body in the best shape possible, right? And talking to Coach Anna and seeing what he wants from me and where he wants me to be so that when I show up on the first day, I'm ready to make an impact right away. And that's my goal, is to come in and make an impact and be a good player on the team.
So you mentioned before that San Diego State's kind of a hybrid, and one of the things that extends even to the coaching staff, right? Because the head coach is really involved with the defensive line. Obviously as a defensive line coach in the NFL, all over the place, one of the best defensive line coaches, there is, period. How exciting is it to have both of those minds and people working with you to help you to kind of reach your full potential?
I mean, that's like one of the reasons why I chose to come there. I mean, are you kidding me? Like as a D lineman, like, are you kidding me? What more could you ask for out of like a staff, right? I mean, you got one. I think the best D coordinator I've met personally and I've seen. The D line coach is the head coach. I mean, how many of those are there? One, I think. I think there's just one. I think there's just him. And then Coach Enna, who's always fired up and knows exactly what he's talking about and has his help from all these stars above him. I mean, it's heaven on earth for a DN.
That's great. I'm not sure that Coach Maddox, Coach Ho, Coach Enna have ever been described as heaven on earth, but there it is. There's the first time. So San Diego State they signed 18 players today. Obviously, you got back at this last couple of weeks. Have you had an opportunity to connect with any of them, and what can that process be like? Between now and June.
Well, of course, when I was down there, I met with a bunch of them. Damn, names are hard. Briley, I'm pretty sure, the O lineman.
Yeah.
What's his name? The Southern California and the other one.
Sin Brennan?
Sin Brennan, yeah. And there's two Bs. I think Radcliffe was there. I like him. All great guys, and I'm excited because I think they're really good players from what I watched. Like quarterback, I watched his highlight reel. I mean, man, oh man, can he sling the ball? So I'm just saying, like, we have a class coming in that's ready to change the game. And the thing is the team doesn't need changing. They're already winning. Like last year, what were they? 24th in the rankings at the end of the year, 23rd. I mean, like, I think we're just gonna get better and go up to a higher ceiling and a higher levels. Because I think the class we have right now is really good. The team is already really good. So that's just adding on to greatness.
Conference realignment is a big deal. And San Diego State is a big part of that. There's a lot of buzz. Pac-12, Big 12. Are you paying attention to that? And what about the possibility that you could be in the same conference and be playing Colorado every year?
Of course, pay attention to it, right? I mean, it's an important thing, right? I mean, at the end of the game, you play the game for the love of it, but it's fun when you play in front of fans. And being in the Pac-12 brings a certain energy and a certain fandom that you don't get in the Mountain West. So, of course, pay attention to it, and it would be amazing to be in the Pac-12. And I think we should be soon. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, of course I want to play Colorado. Of course I want to kill him, right? It's just a competitive nature inside of me. Yeah, I mean, that'd be awesome. So I'm very excited to get in the Pac-12 and I'm coming. He always says that. So that will be the plan when we get there. But for now, we got to worry about Mountain West. We got to worry about the games we have on the schedule, not get ahead of ourselves. But when the time comes, I'm ready. I'm coming. I've been waiting for it since it happened, and I dream about it every day. So.
But we also read that you played tight end. We're also recruited as a tight end. How does playing on that side of the field help you understand, offenses, reading and reacting faster?
Well, first of all, I mean, a joy. This last year, I got to play quarterback, which that will never happen again in my life. So, I mean, that was fun to do that in high school. It really it shows you the mentality you got to go up against, right? A lot of these offensive players or tight ends, especially that's where I've played at. Like you can see. In their stance or in the way they lean or in the way they play and how they're trying to block you to know what play is coming, right? Like how their hips move, you see how they're coming. So as a tight end, I've done all those movements. I've done all those blocks. So I know how to defeat those blocks, right? And even I play a lot of fullback, maybe pulling a guard, right? Same thing kind of as fullback block, maybe across the line of scrimmage. So you know how to get under it or get through it because you've been on both sides of that experience.
Now, we also read that you have a very disciplined and training regimen, already in high school. Why was that so important to you at an earlier age? And, than maybe some other people your age, are really hitting it quite as hard.
Well, my trainer now, I met him freshman year. He's a freshman coach. And in the off season, he's like, hey, you got to come to these workouts. And at that point, I was doing who knows what, who knows where, doing whatever, right? There's no hard work involved. And he just got me, he's working my ass off, running, doing drills until I couldn't walk. And I really found joy in it. I really found joy in the pain, which is kind of, I don't know, weird to say, but it's just so much fun to me to drive to reach to a better place. And then I fell in love with a sport called football, and I took that same energy and I put it towards football. So now it's like you have this love for the pain and the work and the hard work that gets you to these higher places. And you add that with the greatest sport on earth, and it's like the perfect mix for me to go take this sport to another level, right? So for me, it's just it came from within. I mean, my dad's the same way, my mom's the same way, my brother's the same way, right? It's like hard work and dedication is what I've known since I was a young kid, and I applied to football.
You mentioned you played quarterback. Was that just for one game, or was that the whole season?
So we had a lot of quarterback injuries. Our starting quarterback was down, backup quarterback was down, and the other quarterback was down. So we had a young kid who was supposed to be our starting quarterback. Hurt his back early on in the season, out for the season. Senior played a few games, like separated his shoulder, out for like 3 games. The junior, something wrong with his leg, out, right? So coach's like, hell, let's put Brady at quarterback, right? Why not? Put our best player behind the ball. So last 2 games of the season, I started at quarterback. I split time with a freshman who came up because I was not the best at throwing the ball, I'll be honest. So in order to do that, I had a freshman on the team. But I would take it, run the ball. It was a blast. Calling plays in the huddle was something like a lot of kids dream of, and I got to do it. So that was awesome. Yeah, it was an experience for sure.
So San Diego State just had a safety transfer and become a quarterback.
Yeah.
Are you telling us that that's in your future? Because the seeds were planted.
It's in the cards. Tell coach right now I'm coming to play quarterback. Let's get it.
San Diego State has a reputation as a hardworking program. What have you heard about Coach Hall and his strength and conditioning program?
Oh, I've heard a bunch. I mean, I was talking to Cooper, my host, and he's like, "Oh, Coach Hall, Coach Hall gets after it." So, I mean, I'm excited because I love that. That's what I need, right? I don't like coach to baby me around. Like, oh, good job. I need you to yell at me. I need you to slap me on the ass, tell me to go harder, tell me to work harder, tell me I'm not doing enough so I can push harder to go. So, I mean, Coach Hall sounds very exciting to me. I didn't get to meet him when I was there because he was sick, so he didn't talk to us, but I want to meet him and I want to get started because it sounds fun.
I think you're the first person that we've asked about Coach Hall, because normally we're interviewing the players, and a smile came on their face. So I think that the big test is going to be in a couple of years when we ask again. Is that same smile there?
Still there? We'll see. I think it will be.
He's a great guy.
Some mornings it won't be, but at the end of the day, the smile will still be there.
100%.
So as a way to get Aztec fans to get to know incoming players a little bit better, we have some fun rapid fire questions. You ready for that?
Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, steak and baked potatoes.
Okay.
I'm simple. My mom's steak and baked potatoes.
How do you like your steak?
Medium.
Perfect.
I don't like it straight off the cow.
There's a couple steps in between, man.
Yeah, I was there with the players. This guy's eating it like rare. I'm like, yeah, like straight off the cow. I'm like, you can't do that. You gotta cook it a little bit.
Sounds like one of those Texas kids.
Yes, he was.
Favorite movie or TV show?
Ooh, I just finished Game of Thrones a little bit ago, so I might go with Game of Thrones.
Nice. Have you watched House of Dragons?
No, I have to watch that, but I'm taking a break because I get too into TV shows and I binge, and it's not good for me.
What about favorite musical artist or group?
I mean, gosh, another basic answer. I have to go like Drake or Jay-Z. I also love Jackson 5. I'll jam some Jackson 5 every time. So
some artists that were around before you were born.
Yeah, but like, come on, they're timeless. We all know, everyone knows like top 5 Jackson 5 songs.
Yeah, Drake is a popular answer we've gotten from a lot of players, but I think you're the first one that's mentioned Jay-Z.
Jay-Z is the most underrated rapper. I mean, no one puts him like he's number 1. Like he's the best. I'm sorry, people don't put him up there, but like, come on, he's the king.
He played at Viejas Arena at San Diego State a couple years ago on the 444 tour.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds
what
fun.
about favorite professional athlete?
Khalil Mack and Paul George. I've been a Paul George fan forever. I loved him at the Pacers. And then he hasn't been the same recently, but I always watch him in the playoffs. I'm always watching the Clippers to see how Paul George is doing. And Khalil Mack, man, come on. Who doesn't want to watch Khalil Mack play football? Come on. He's so much fun to watch. He just runs through everyone. He's just a brick wall and flies around and hits. I mean, he's awesome to watch.
Both of those were at one point San Diego State rivals, yeah?
Where were they?
Paul George went to Fresno State. And so they were in conference, right? They were in conference.
Yeah.
And then Khalil Mack's last collegiate game was in the Idaho Potato Bowl against the Aztecs.
Who
And the
won?
Aztecs handled Buffalo because they put 3 players on Mac every single play.
He is unreal. I mean, have you seen the size of the guy? Like, come on. How do you block that?
With 3 people. Although I will say, I think shout out Bryce Quigley, who had a little time in the NFL he had a nice game against Mac that game for sure.
It helps that he was on Buffalo and they probably didn't have any other
Yeah, that's true.
respectable players when he was on there.
Don't take that away from Bryce. Come on, man.
Okay, I have a question for you guys. Since
Yes,
you're
sir.
around the program a lot, when's the Aztec mascot coming back?
Oh, wow.
Come on,
I
that was
wouldn't- I-
awesome. The horse. all
No,
that.
it's unbelievable, and the history of it is phenomenal. Florida State with their famous Seminole,
yeah.
right? He coming out
They
on a
stole
horse,
it.
and it's
I saw that story.
okay. So you know that they copied that from San Diego State,
Yeah.
and so it's always been there. They've tried to make it a little bit more historically accurate, and that didn't come about. I don't know that there's a plan to resurrect the Aztec warrior.
What would be the
Although
plan?
there
You
is
go
a
to the
very
Aztecs, like the Aztec people have, I don't know what you call it, like Aztec people, and ask them, hey, can we use
yeah,
the-
I'm not sure that I don't know that the Aztec people necessarily would object. I'm not sure that they're the people who are saying it, but yeah, it's there is a very very enthusiastic alumni group trying to keep that going. And one of the people who was Monty, because it's Emperor Montezuma. You'll see him. He comes to the games, trying just to keep people, that this is something that's okay, and you can do it in a respectful way, and it doesn't have to be, some of those other stuff. But at this point, no, I don't know of any plans for them to be able to bring it back. But it's
awesome though.
Yeah,
running
no
out
doubt.
the field, the horse, and everything.
2 more rapid fire stuff before we let you go. Favorite hobby?
I mean, lifting weights. That's really boring, but I mean, I love cleaning. Like, I could clean all day, just sit there and do power cleans. I also love shooting hoops. I played basketball 2 years in high school. I didn't play this year because I got to prepare for college. But shooting hoops and lifting weights. So, yeah.
There's a lot of basketball players on the team, on the football team. So
I think as an athlete, I believe athletes should play sports. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, like, you should focus on the sport your whole life. Like, no, like, I'm gonna play basketball, I'm gonna play baseball, I'm gonna play like soccer, whatever. Like, it's fun, right? You gotta have fun while you're young. So basketball is awesome too.
Yeah, we've heard about some good pickup games between the football players, so I'm sure you'll be a part of that.
Yeah, I gotta get in on that.
Last one. What are you going to be majoring in at San Diego State?
Business. Locked in for
Nice.
sure. Then go to commercial real estate after if I don't go to the NFL. So yeah.
Well, awesome, Brady. Thank
Sounds
you so
incredible.
much for taking the time. Congrats again on signing, and we look forward to covering you when you get to campus.
Yep. Well, thank you guys so much. This is awesome.
Good to
Have
meet
a
you,
good
man.
night. That was our interview with one of the newest Aztecs, Brady Nassar. Paul, what were your quick takeaways from our conversation with Brady?
For starters, if you want a new co-host, he was unbelievable. I mean, the polish of him as an interviewee was just amazing. I was shocked that I was speaking to somebody who's, a senior in high school. Very, very impressive interview. Very impressive. Just his ability to, have a full understanding of what he wants to say, who he is as a person. I think the only thing that he slipped on for a half second was remembering Coach Maddox's name. And what's fun about it is it's the best person to like forget his name, because I guarantee you Coach Maddox is going to let him know about that. So that's great. But it was a great interview. Lots and lots to talk about and discuss. But what were your initial thoughts?
I always have to remind myself that, especially when we talk to recruits or commits, that these guys are seniors in high school. They're 17 years old, maybe some are 18,
right?
Maybe even some are 16, and just try to think back of what I was doing at that age. Obviously, podcasts were not invented when we were at that age. But like just sitting, and it kind of goes along with what you're saying, and just how articulate he was. He was funny. confident, but not in an arrogant way. Like, he knows what he can do on the football field. He knows what he can bring to the team, and he's very eager to do that. With the losses on the defensive line, and already with the size and weight that he has, like he could step in and play as a true freshman. We don't see a lot of linemen play as a true freshman, especially at San Diego State. Most of the time it's people, farther away from the ball, like secondary or running backs or whatever. But he's got a legit chance to get on the field, once he steps on campus in June, and what he does for the summer program and fall camp.
I agree with you. It's definitely, as we'll get into it later, San Diego State is always going to be a development kind of a program that's built on the development of its players, but he's definitely one that you could see being able to be, potentially even at like the back end of that rotation, right, for the D line. I think the other thing that really stood out to me was just the conversation about Colorado. It's difficult to be put in the position of the coaches right on Colorado's staff. Clearly, the commitments that they had and things of that nature. I mean, this could be Deion Sanders' only time to attract top talent to Colorado, right? If they don't win in the next couple of years, some of the shine off of Prime will wane. And so he has to have open spots to be able to bring in, the players that he had at Jackson State, to be able to bring in, to go and try to out recruit and take some of the top talent over there. So you get the idea that they're going to have to let some people go, I think. And then the process of how that happened. I mean, the rumors of where Colorado was in the hiring process, they seemed like they had enough time to be able to know who they were and be able to, and this I think is the other side, be able to tell these other players who now need to go and pivot and find new homes sooner than 3 days after the fact, doing it in such a way that's kind of this, oh, by the way, you're not going to be brought back. So, things can always have a different perspective when somebody gives their ideas of it, for sure. But I think that it happened, it's not what he wanted, right? He was very clear on social media after the fact that he wanted to be at Colorado. He told us that he was excited when they heard the new hire, and he wanted to be there. But sometimes things can happen in life that you don't expect and you don't want, and it comes out for the best, and to be able to have San Diego State, as he said, always be there. And then the honesty and being upfront and knowing where he stands, knowing, what the coaches are thinking, that kind of refrain that we keep hearing from these players who are attracted to San Diego State, who come to the program. It probably made the sting of Colorado and everything that happened there kind of go away a little bit, because he wasn't stepping into something he didn't know. He wasn't having to just trust that they're going to be different than the business of football, and that he can kind of still have that same, experience of being able to come underneath some coaches who are actually going to care about him, who are actually going to develop him in a way, as a person and as a player.
Going back to the Colorado thing, we didn't ask him about this, but he had one tweet that I just absolutely loved. And Coach Prime tweeted out, I'm looking for game changers on the offensive defensive line. I need smart, tough, fast, disciplined young men with character. This is after he got hired, and we found out those commitments were going to be honored. And Brady responded, "You had me, coach, and let me go." And I think after talking to him, was how confident he is, but how mature he is. I just love that tweet even more. And, potentially, if being conference mates, in a couple of years, if this
is the rumor,
head to the Pac-12, guess who else is in the Pac-12? And he seemed like he would have been very excited to be playing against them in the near future. So I think that's really exciting. The other part of that, I think, is his positional versatility or flexibility to play on the line he talked about he could play out wide as a 9 technique, but he can also play inside as a tackle 1 or a 3 technique. And, I think the one weak spot maybe on the roster for 2023 right now is the defensive tackle. And if he has to move inside to play earlier, I could potentially see that. Maybe he needs to bulk up a little bit for that. But, I think that versatility is going to be a critical factor on him getting on the field.
Yeah, and I think you could see with not just him, but some of the other players that they've got, a lot of everyone's standing up or only one person has their hand in the ground, and where are they going to be bringing pressure from and all that. I think you could see a lot of that. It'll be interesting to see because, as I wrote in the recruiting article, one advantage that he had in high school is that he has been a near professional in his preparation at that early level, right? Which is special because a lot of times players can go to the next level and it's more than they can handle, and it takes a while to get adjusted and things like that. From all indications, that's not going to be the case for him, right? It might be a step up, it might be the next level, but it's what he's done. When he gets to San Diego State, everybody will be as dedicated as him, or in the ballpark as dedicated as him. And so he's not going to be the biggest, strongest kid. He's not going to be the person who works the hardest. He's not going to be the person who's worked for years at it, and there's going to be a learning curve. And what does that, how does that happen? He talked about attacking with speed and then coming at him with power, and might not be able to be that predictable at the next level. And so how he's going to be able to handle, I think the mental part is probably going to be more than anything that he physically, because as you said, I think he's ready to be able to provide some snaps for the Aztecs at a variety of positions.
Aztecs signed 18 players in this early signing day class. 14 are high school seniors about to become incoming freshmen, 3 JUCO transfers, and 1 FCS transfer. Brady is the third of those 18 we've had on the podcast. Earlier this summer, we had Tyson Berry and Marcus Ratcliffe on episode 27. We hope to have more of the rest of those 15 guys on, future episodes. So stay tuned for that. But just shifting gears to the class, you wrote an article about kind of the highlights and the key areas of the class. What were your main thoughts or takeaways from what they were able to do on day one?
On day one, I think that there was a good mix of trying to prepare for the future and also trying to address some of the weaknesses, the potential weaknesses, or whatever the right phrasing is, strengthening some of the places where they're going to need some extra competition for 2023. Interesting part is how few high school players that they sign, right? And we always have those wonderful conversations about the rankings and all that kind of stuff. And what do they mean? And can you really separate a player by hundredths of a point and all that kind of stuff? But all of that aside, I find it really funny that there's an element of people who freak out about where San Diego State ranks nationally, because if you're going to quote any of these, rankings, you probably should quote and understand like how they do it. And anytime you only have a limited number of players, you're always going to be way lower on the rankings because it's cumulative, right? And it's all the total class. And so the more players that you have, the higher up you're going to be. And that, San Diego State, their average rankings and stuff like that was on par with some of the people that you can see in their offers that they're competing against, right, in the Pac-12. So I thought overall it was a very solid class. I think the biggest kind of takeaway, with the exception of 2 people, is just how tall everybody is. Everybody's over 6 foot. Everyone has good length. And I think there's definitely been, with a few exceptions of people sprinkle in the last few years, I think they've really put an emphasis on finding longer athletes. And I think they did that with this class.
Nearly half of the 18 guys, 8 out of the 18 are in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. All 3 JUCO guys are in the trenches. So that there's an emphasis in finding guys, not just for, 4 years, but guys that can come in and play, because we know the struggles of the offensive line from last year. We know that the defensive line is losing every starter from last year. So there's an emphasis there, which is good. And I think looking back at last year's class, where I felt was the strength was at the safety position. And you can probably say the same thing again this year.
Deja vu, right?
How are Kyle Hoke has his hands full, because how are you going to keep all these guys happy? Because you've got 3 returning starters at safety. You lose Baskerville, but you've got the 3 guys that came in last year, and then now you've got 4 new guys this year. Like, that's a lot of guys that are talented and probably deserve to get on the field. I don't envy Coach Hope with managing that, because it's a crowded but extremely talented safety room that's going to be fun to watch over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think some of that is due to the fact that, your best player in high school, right, who fits that mold, who's not a linebacker, who's not a defensive lineman, you don't want to put that player necessarily on one side of the field and allow the team to throw to the opposite side. You want that person to be able to roam and play center field, read the quarterback. And so many of those players, that's what they did. And so they're safeties in high school. And I think what San Diego State is doing is they're bringing as many of these players as they can. And then they're going to try to see where they're at, not only at those positions, but I think also, you just saw Des Malone slide over to corner. You saw New Zealand Williams drop down to weak side linebacker. And I think they're just trying to bring in as many of these athletes as possible because they help on special teams. They can move around. They can play other positions. I mean, I think you could argue that some of these guys, they look better in high school as wide receivers, but they're going to play on the defensive side, in the same mold as, like Max Garrison, right? Who obviously is a DB but was a tremendous running back. And you have those questions, like, could he still play that position? And, his one kick return that he had where he just absolutely exploded, and you go, oh, okay. And there's something to this, and you just wonder where those things are at. But I agree with you. I think this class, unlike most, you're going to know right away whether or not it was a good class. If you don't see the 3 junior college players and the 1 transfer, in the 2 deep, then they should have used those scholarships somewhere else. They should have tried to be somewhere else. And San Diego State has not had a huge history of junior college guys coming in and being good right away. I remember Rocky Long talking about Jonah Tavai as just kind of like he's just not even really doing anything. We need him to be so much better, that sort of thing. And obviously he grew to become who he is, but it's it'll be interesting to see, because as much as coaches copy their own success, players do the same thing. Right. And when you see junior college players like Jonah Tavai come in and have great success, it's going to attract, some of these other players. And you look at the guys that you mentioned from the junior college, and, they look to be exactly what the Aztecs like in those players up front. And, as much as they're losing, San Diego State's like second 3 linemen, right? People who played a lot of snaps, Wyatt Drager, help me out here, Garrett Fountain, and Daniel Opoko, they're all back. And so, those are presumably, maybe throw in somebody else, Nasir Sims or something like that, Darian Dalton. I mean, there's the inside, and you're starting to see that they got players. Now, do they have
Ryan Henderson?
There's another one. There's from last year's class. I mean, so there are players there. But Jonah Tavai is an All-American. Even his great until the second half of the season. There was definitely a drop off at first until they got kind of their legs under him. So good things all around. But tell me what your thoughts about the quarterback, right? 'Cause that's what everyone wants to talk about. Did the Aztecs find someone who could potentially be their signal caller of the future?
Well, Brady told us, Brady Nassar, that he watched film on him and he looked like he could sling it. So he's sold. Yeah, Javance Johnson, you wrote about this in your article. I think with the coaching change, offensive coaching change, we all kind of stepped back and said, okay, we're just waiting for that decommitment tweet or
Yep.
that offer from somebody else. And, he's stuck to San Diego State. And I think that says a lot about San Diego State as a program, not just by coaches. And, that says a lot about Ryan Lindley as well. But yeah, he plays the part. He looks talented. He had a great year at Chaminade High School. It's interesting if Jalen Maiden never happened as a quarterback and he was still a safety, where would they be next year, right? Javance, you could say, maybe has a potential to compete with Kyle and Liu and maybe a transfer quarterback. I think with Jalen coming back, I think the quarterback position is, as at least starter-wise, health permitting, is pretty set. So, I think Javance might have that one redshirt year where he's practicing, he's on the scout team, but he has time to develop. But yeah, he looks the part. It's a huge get for San Diego State to not just get him to commit so early, but to keep the commit and sign despite the coaching change. It's an exciting signing for San Diego State to look at, 1, 2, 3 years down the road.
Yeah, I remember after the UNLV press conference with UNLV, we were exiting the media room, and Ryan Lindley was down there, and he's not typically down there, and he's a giant human being, so he stands out like he's unlike you, most of us aren't very tall, and so you're like, okay, is that okay? And so he was there. He was there with Javance Johnson, and we commented to each other. We said, well, this is the biggest game that's going to be played at Snapdragon today, right? It's much bigger than the UNLV game because he is an impressive player, and I think the thing that's most impressive to me is that he throws the football, right? You get guys who are 6'4", 200, and he's every bit as listed that he's a big guy too. Did not look out of place next to Lindley. And you watch his film and he's not looking to run. He's looking to stay in the pocket. He's looking to throw. He can make all the throws. And I think that there was even, a few times where some next level kind of passes were thrown where, there's a linebacker sitting in the middle of the field and he throws it intentionally behind his receiver and basically throws him open, and completed the pass. And so I think those kinds of things are good because, San Diego State has gotten players in the past and you watch their high school film and it's just filled with them being faster than everybody, running by people and throwing the ball 70 yards or scrambling and somebody being wide open. And it's difficult, unless you're Michael Vick, it's difficult to see how that can translate to a much more, regimented system that is college sports. But I don't think it's hard with Johnson. I think that his ability to, as a passer is really good. He played, that's just the way all kind of quarterbacking has become. You don't see him scanning the field and finding his fifth receiver, but he's not going to be asked to do that very much at State either. There's only going to be a handful of times every game where there's not like safety does this and you throw here, and here are your three options really on this play. So I think it's a very exciting thing. And as much as Jalen Maiden solidifies the position, I think it's very, very important, the competition for who the backup is, because whoever is able to separate themselves from the other ones is definitely going to have a leg up in that competition. But as importantly, they're going to need to know whether or not they have to go and find a transfer, an older guy to be able to push the younger guys, because if everything works according to plan, you're going to have a red shirt freshman and two redshirt sophomores vying for the position. And truthfully, the way that this goes, that wouldn't be shocking if those were the three people. And then interestingly enough, too, going back to the idea of the Pac-12 or the Big 12, or when they're moving to the Power 5, it would be interesting if they're doing that with one of these young guys under center.
Yeah, I mean, if Liu and Kyle in their third year in the program aren't ready to be starters, and I think that's a miss from a recruiting angle. So I think those guys will, at least through another year this year, I think by that third year, they should be ready to go, and I think they should be ready to contribute and play really well. Obviously, we'll see how that goes, but I think the coaching staff at least would feel good about having those three guys competing with multiple years into the program. I would say, looking at the class overall, one major downside is 0 FBS transfers, and I know it's not done yet. But a lot of transfers are off. The FBS transfers are off the board already with how quick it's moved. After last year, not only did they get multiple FBS transfers, but they got transfers from Power 5 schools who became starters for San Diego State this year. And so, they went after, made offers. Some of them committed elsewhere. Some of them haven't made commitments yet. But I think, if they're trying to fill a couple of those main holes that they're losing based on seniors leaving. I don't know if they've done that yet, and maybe center could be a possibility. Defensive tackle we already talked about. If they don't feel like the guy is already in the room to be the starting defensive tackle, that could be a transfer. And then another wide receiver. Raphael Williams is a great get. But assuming Jesse Matthews is moving on, I think they need another starting wide receiver. Someone that's experienced that can step in and play to go with Mekhi Shaw, Breon Petty, and some of the younger guys that are going to be stepping in. So there's areas I think that are still missing and deficient, and they've got some time to still fill it. And I think that's going to ultimately decide how critical and how successful this class is going to be short term, and then obviously long term.
Yeah, let me ask you a little bit more about that. You have done a excellent job behind the scenes. We have our spreadsheet with the projected roster that we're adding things to, and just trying to understand from your calculations, where are the Aztecs at in terms of scholarship offers, and do they have the ability to bring in FBS guys?
Right now, they do not. With the 18 signings, and there's one or two players, I'm not 100% positive whether they're walk-ons or have scholarship, but I believe that they're at their limit right now. Those are difficult conversations probably for a staff to have, but there's probably a couple players that are, third or fourth on a depth chart that have scholarships, have had discussions with the coaching staff, and if a FBS transfer comes alive and wants to come to San Diego State, there could be some potential guys who transfer, enter the portal next year because, their spot's no longer there. But to answer your question, I think they're at their limit right now, scholarship wise.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the staff would do that. I think they've been pretty clear that, the commitment is to help them graduate. And I think they'll be very honest. I mean, I thought that speaking of the honest part, you mentioned this, the number of safeties, right? In the program. Well, did you notice who was on the 2 deep for the bowl game? It was Eric Butler and Josh Hunter. And so that, you go and you start looking at some of those other players and saying, look, here are two guys, Eric Butler, played in enough games on special teams, so he'll be a sophomore. Hunter, obviously he redshirted, I believe. And so you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, well, these are the guys who are going to be behind the Barfield next year and Celestine. And so I think that some of that's going to be happening. But I think as long as a player goes and says, yeah, I'm third on the depth chart, but I want to help on special teams. I love San Diego. I love my teammates. I don't think that the staff would give away their position. I think they would be very honest with them, and they would say, look, like, your chances of being able to be on the field are limited. But so then it goes back to your point, like they weren't successful in being able to, find FBS transfers. And while I think numerically it's different than what happened last year. I actually don't find it to be all that dissimilar, only because if you look at the FBS transfers that they got, right, I think Devin Lamp is the only one, and help me to remember one, that didn't have like an extra connection to the program. That
Cade Bennett didn't have one.
Cade Bennett would be the other one. He was a very, very good one. Yeah, absolutely. That's the other one. But Cade Bennett is a perfect example that disproves what I just said. But I'm thinking, Cooper McDonald, right? Obviously,
brothers and San Diego.
Brothers and the San Diego connection. Those were the vast majority of them. So I mean, that would my point being is that so they would have those two who weren't, didn't have some connection to San Diego, which means they have two more as opposed to having five more. And so it just looks a little bit closer to what they had. But at the last press conference, Coach Hoke did talk about that he expects more people to be able to do that. It'll be interesting to see, who those players are. I don't understand. I don't know. Maybe they think they're going to have film during the bowl, but they have until I think it's like January 18th or something like that for the first window. I think the question that was asked said, I think there are only 2 transfers. And I think he says, I think there's going to be more. Maybe he didn't know they were, but there's 5 that have been out there, at least from the start of last year. And so it'll be interesting to see exactly how that broke down. But I thought, that idea that they're already at 85 is interesting. It's just interesting in a lot of ways. So tell me, go ahead.
There could be, and we're getting a little too detailed into these conversations, but there could be some players that are behind on the depth chart that have told the staff that they want to transfer, but they also want to be part of the team and go through practice and go through the bowl game activities and potentially get a chance to play on the field before they enter the portal. So the coaching staff may already know, hey, we've got 4 guys that have told us they're going to go
100%.
into the portal. And so we know internally we've got 4 extra scholarships that we can offer to more high school commits, more JCs, more FBS transfers. So those are stuff we don't know, but the coaching staff could potentially know, and they know how many scholarships they're working with. And I think Coach Hoke said, 18 to 23, right, is who we could sign. They've signed 18, so maybe he knows there's 5 guys that are entering the portal after the bowl game. We're speculating, but just reading between the lines, that could be a potential too.
Yeah, the part of it that doesn't make sense to me unless the player was retiring, like they're older and they realize that they just don't want to continue playing football. It's hard for me to understand why somebody would not put their name in the portal like as soon as possible. You know what I mean? Like why I guess wait until after players have signed and things of that nature. It seems like you would limit your options. But of course, I mean, this is a whole other thing, because obviously after spring ball, there's another window where players can come from and leave and all of that. So, without pushing too much into next year and things like that, I did want to add that, San Diego State is always going to be, for a long time, they're going to be a program of development. Even if they go into a Power 5 conference, that's not going to change. I think Utah is a terrific example. And if they could follow in Utah's steps, it would just be something else. But Utah went into the Pac-12, I believe it was 2010. So they was already announced in 2009, right? But these rankings that everyone's paying attention to, in 2008, they were the 61st overall team. They jumped immediately. In 2007, it was the same. They jumped immediately the next year up into the 40s. The next year after that, they were in the 30s. They spent a top 40 team in the country for a decade, not doing anything like that. Then they found success and they jumped into the top 25. This year, for the first time, they have a top 25 recruiting class. And I think, unless San Diego is just so much more attractive than Salt Lake City, which I don't think that would necessarily be the case when it comes to football recruiting. I think that San Diego State is always going to be a program, at least for the foreseeable future, that this National Signing Day is always going to be about 3 years from now, like you mentioned with Liu and with Kyle Crum. And I don't think there's anything that changes that, right? I mean, I think that if there's two players outside of the junior college guys and the transfer, if there are two guys that play, like not on special teams, play on offense and defense, it's a phenomenal class next year. I mean, that's, you get Noah Avenger. I mean, he's somebody who played as a freshman and has been there the whole time. And who, you know what I mean? Now you start getting into Josh Simmons, right? You start getting into Ross Masuli, those young guys on the offensive line. Everyone can talk about how well that worked out and what they're thinking about that. But that's what San Diego State is. They're a program that's built on development. And these guys have to be better. These guys in 3 years have to be better than what all of the players ranked above them and the programs ranked above them. They have to pass them in the 3 years for San Diego State to get back to that top 25 level that they were 2 seasons ago.
Last question on the signing class. Out of the 18 guys, who's going to have the biggest impact on the team in 2023?
Of the 18?
Yeah.
Okay. Of the 18, let me just give
and
a quick...
I wonder if
it's Raphael Williams.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. What about? So that's obvious.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was like, tough. Wait, leave your tough one to the end.
Take away the 4 college transfers and look at the 14 high schoolers.
14 high schoolers. Who is going to have the biggest impact?
When we do our end of season recap next December, and we're going to say out of those 14 guys, this guy had the most impact, right?
I'm going to go with Tyson Berry.
I was thinking that too. Not because I think he's the best player or the most talented player, but because of his skill set. You can get thrown into jet sweeps and screens and slants and things like that, and maybe kick returns. He could be the guy that gets on the field more than others, not because he's playing every snap, but because he's got those special skills that could be utilized. So that's a good one.
I agree, and because I mean that's what it is. You talk about all these safeties, right?
Yeah. How are they going to get on the field with the guys in front of them?
Completely. You would not expect that. There is some idea that some of the players at linebacker.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to be looking there, but it's a tough position, man, to be able to play outside linebacker. I think Ryan Silver has a good potential as a offensive guard. But it's tough to be able to say that you're going to be able, unless one of those guys slide over to center. And I that seems really, really tough. Chris Fuel, the defensive lineman / linebacker, locally, he plays above his age. And so he's a very instinctual guy. And then, you go into the defensive line, but I picked Tyson Berry because I think that he has potential to return some kicks. And if he does get thrown back there to return kicks, I think that could be really interesting. I would want to say too, the other potential shift that might be taking place at San Diego State a little bit is they're bringing in a lot of these like fast, smaller guys to play wide receiver. And I think it's really smart of them to do that, especially next year with the accuracy that Jalen Maiden has in being able to throw crossing routes, because the idea typically is if somebody's going to play man to man because they're going to try to stop the run, like everybody tries to do against San Diego State, you have a one-on-one matchup on the outside and you hope that somebody could have the speed to beat them deep. But that same thing works if they're fast enough to be able to get across the field. And, with the players that they got, obviously Barry Williams, we were talking about, and then, Hassan Mahassan next year, hopefully he's healthy and he's able to contribute from last year's class. And you put these speedsters there and you try to play more East and West to take advantage of what Maiden is good at. You could, have a very fast receiving core that is maybe a little different than kind of the jump ball guys. Not to say that they don't. I mean, Balin Brooks, oh my goodness, that the wide receiver that they picked up from this class. I mean, he looks like a stud. I mean, they played him everywhere in high school, and so it's not to say that there's not other parts of it, but there does seem to be a little bit of an emphasis on some of those things, and it wouldn't shock me. Again, still depending on what Jesse Matthews does, if Mekhi Shaw plays on the outside next year, where he was the backup. But it's a fun day because, it is National Sign Day. It was a little weird with them being in Hawaii and not being able to go and ask questions and things like that. But we're in the works of, talking to the staff and trying to figure out all of those things going forward. But overall, I think it's a class that the San Diego State's fans should be happy about, as evidenced by the proof of, they beat out a lot of Power 5 schools for these kids. And, we'll see how they develop over the next few years.
So San Diego State 2022 is not over yet. You got the Hawai'i Bowl coming up on Christmas Eve. It's been, almost 4 weeks since the last game. So you almost kind of get out of this mindset where like there's a game to play or get ready for, or to preview or whatever. They play Middle Tennessee on Christmas Eve, 5:00 Pacific time. Middle Tennessee State has some crazy ranking statistics, forcing turnovers, interceptions, blocked kicks. But they also give up a lot of passing yards. They throw for a lot. They have a spread offense. So how do you think this game can and will play out for San Diego State?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we should mention that Michael Shawcroft, who obviously we've had on the podcast, had his mom on the podcast, made the announcement that we had been told that it was happening, but just wanted to allow him to be able to be the one to say it, that this will be his last game. And I went back and I reread the article that I wrote that came from our interview with him, and just the different tone, man, was something. We were talking about him having a healthy year, and that's like his number one goal and things like that. And for that not to be able to happen, you just felt for the guy. But at the same time, I think he had a fantastic season. And you start looking at his body of work and being a local guy and things of that nature. And I think it's going to be, fun to be able to watch him play that last game and be able to celebrate, all of that. So we obviously wish Michael the best and all of that. But to answer your question, I think on paper, this game, the specific matchup does not favor San Diego State. What Middle Tennessee State was good at was big plays, and what San Diego State's main weakness was defensively was big plays. And so I think that if you get a normal game between the two, if the Aztecs are able to limit the big play, I think that's important. San Diego State has also had at times had trouble with tackling, and that's what their spread offense is intended to do. It's intended to get them in space, and if the month layover, if the water parks, if the Hawaii life makes them a little bit less tenacious at tackling and they get back to some of those bad habits, it's going to be a difficult time for the defense. Flip side, I agree that San Diego State should have a good job, a good opportunity to be able to pass the ball, but they haven't been good in the red zone, and I think it's a great opportunity to try to be able to do something like that. But I would also expect that their running game will be a little bit more successful than we've seen it the last few weeks, primarily because they're out of conference and they seem to always run the ball better when they're not playing conference opponents. So it should be an entertaining game. It should be an entertaining game, and definitely look forward to it for sure. What about you?
Yeah, I do think coming off of the Air Force game where the offense put up 3 points, -1 rushing yards, I think the offense will look more like it did in the first, 6 games that Jalen Maiden played. I think it will be, and it's not going to be in the 40s, I doubt. I think, you could see the game in the 20s. early 30s. But like last year's bowl game, you could see the offense open up a little bit more and call some plays that maybe they don't call during the regular season. We talk a lot about depth charts and two deeps, right? We probably spend too much time talking about them. And I think during this regular season, I realized at some point that like the two deeps really had no value. Like I stopped
Completely. 100%.
based on who was starting, who was playing, who was listed on the depth chart. Like this year more than any other year, like those depth charts seemed so worthless, right? I say that knowing that I'm also going to talk about the depth chart for this.
I would say let me do before you talk about the depth chart. I would phrase it a little bit differently. I always feel like the depth chart is more about communicating a message to the players than it is about giving information to people outside of the program. And so that's how I would phrase it. Like I actually think it can be useful to understand something, but I think you have to be able to speak its language to be able to see what it's communicating. And the last thing this coaching staff wants to do is tip its hand at all to what it, is possibly doing on the field. But you were going to say, so about this depth chart that you don't get anything out and that isn't very helpful. Yeah. What did you gain from it?
Let's talk about it anyway.
Let's talk about it.
Center and right guard.
I noticed.
So Tommy Mirabella has been the backup center to Uluave the last 2 years, I believe. Yeah, yep. I think all of last year he was the backup center, and then almost all of this year, maybe up until now, in terms of the depth chart anyway. Ross Ulugalu Masuli was a starting right guard. He missed 3 games due to injury. Dean Abdullah, a JUCO transfer, played and started those 3 games. Ross comes back, and the first game he came back, he didn't start because of a disciplinary reason. Then he played a couple games, and he was out again. But this time, Tommy Mirabella played and started the last 3 games at right guard. But Ross was still listed as the starter at right guard, I believe, even the games he missed due to injury. Now, with this bowl game, Tommy Mirabella is listed as the starter at right guard, and Ross is the backup. Does that tell us that the coaching staff isn't happy with how he played? The disciplinary issue factoring in? Who knows? And then now Dean Abdullah is listed as the backup center. And we know Uluave is leaving, and they need a starting center next year. So is this a chance that the coaching staff wants to see how Dean Abdullah does as a center in a bowl game? Maybe for a drive or two at the end of the game? What does that say about what they feel with Mirabella being the center next year? So I say all that, like that kind of surprised me, and I'm curious to see how in-game snaps actually turn out in the bowl game, and what that means for next year.
I think you're absolutely right. They also have Dallas Branch as the starter at corner, and so you can already see we were wondering if one of the players who may transfer could have been from one of those cornerbacks, right? I mean, just talking out loud, just saying, hey, how does that work? But they all seem to be super locked in and ready to compete with each other. And obviously they rotate them. And so they give, I think honestly, more than playing time or as much as playing time, I think people just want a fair shake. And I think if they feel like you're being fair with them, like why would they go to some place where they may not be fair, And so I think that that's reflected in of these guys coming and saying, we're going to go and I'm just going to be better than Des Malone. If you're Noah Avenger, Noah Tumblin, I'm going to be better than Dallas Branch, and they're going to play me because I've been given a fair shot. But I noticed the same thing about the offensive line. I thought that Coach Goff at the very beginning of the year was very, very high on Mirabella. It sounded to me like he was going to be given the keys to being the center. And so I would still expect that to be the case next year. I think it would be interesting if that wasn't. And I think all of these snaps that he's getting at right guard, I think only makes the offensive line better because, with the way it kind of ended up playing, he's about as seasoned as Ross Masuli, right? I mean, he got about as many snaps. And so I think I think that's just going to be really interesting. And then Dean Abdullah, going back to the conversation about being able to come right in and play, he was undersized but you saw the quick feet, you saw all of that. And, you go back to the recruiting class that San Diego State just brought in, and you have a very similar guy, Kyle Steinbach, who's coming in, and he's actually more on the outside, although that's what Abdullah played in junior college as well. But, you can see what they're doing. They're trying to bring in these athletes who can play multiple positions because you don't know what this line is going to be. So I definitely noticed that as well. And I'm interested to see, it would be interesting, as you said, how they do decide with the snaps, right? Especially at a place like offensive line. And then of course, I think the other thing that's there is how you watch the game with Jesse Matthews, right? He has, he needs to do whatever he thinks is best, and clearly has earned that right. But is this his last game? And I think, you look at the offense next year, and the offense could be pretty potent if Jesse Matthews comes back. The offense goes from, you start being really good at every position, right? You're going to be looking for a running back, but you have guys there with experience. And if they take that next step like you expect them to, you obviously have the quarterback, you have a tight end, but receiver would go, and you'd be like, oh man, the first time San Diego State has a returning quarterback in years, and they don't have a receiving core. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, but Jesse Matthews comes back, and arguably your best player comes back on the offensive side of the ball. And all of a sudden that weakness looks like a strength, and everybody else can kind of slot in next to him. And so I think that's another really just interesting part of how that is. And then the other part that I'm looking about the game, I just thought the play calling against Air Force was strange. 2-to-1 passing. And I'm interested to see if there's any indication about, Jeff Horton and, what his plans are afterwards by how he calls the game. And he obviously, and it just was so opposite of everything that they had done up to that point, that it was just weird. And so I'm curious to see if they do get back to like just the play calling type. And then finally, last thing for me, I hope Chance Bell can get some runs. We obviously had him on the podcast. He was phenomenal and just didn't stay healthy throughout the season. But it'd be great to see him be able to break out and just kind of in his career on a high point, given everything that he's meant to the program over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Jeff Horton thing is really interesting because you'd have to imagine by this point, like, they're not going to bring in a guy from the outside to be the offensive coordinator next year. Like, with recruiting and things like that, like, Jeff Horton has said he's an interim. Like, Boise State just hired an offensive coordinator from another school like last week, right before signing day, because I think when you're having these conversations with offensive recruits, you're not going to just say, oh, we're the coaching staff, and then bring in somebody from the outside. Are they going to keep Horton as offensive coordinator for another year and kind of groom Lindley? Are they going to bump up somebody else from the offensive staff as a play caller? That we won't know. We don't know, and we may not know until after the game. But, I think we're at the point where the likelihood of them bringing somebody from the outside is pretty nil at this point.
Interesting. I don't know that because when asked about it, Coach always talked about that they were going to wait till after the season to have that conversation. So the timetable's still there. I definitely, because there's so many ways it could go, right? Jeff Horton, if he's the interim, would he still be willing to be the running backs coach, and do the role that he started the year at, which then means that you can have somebody else come in as the offensive coordinator. Do you even want to do that? You get Jalen Maiden back. He's got 1 year. He's obviously done well in the offense, picking it up. Like, do you want him to be able to build off of the same offense? But then the flip side of it is, if you're going into 2024 with a young quarterback, do you want them to be learning a new system at that point? And then, throughout college football, the offensive coordinator is typically also the quarterback coach.
Yeah.
And is there somebody out there who is comfortable with just being the offensive coordinator and keeping Lindley there? If you do have an idea of Lindley as the guy, what is he going to learn in 1 year that he doesn't already possess that is going to make him be ready for it? Or whenever this window of time is, why not hand him the keys now? And allow him to develop both of those things. And then, of course, with Lindley, there's the question of Zach Arnett, right? He was very open with us when we had him on in Lindley in May. And, he's very close with Zach when Zach was a graduate assistant, when Lindley was still playing at San Diego State. They're very, very close. Could Arnett go and say, hey, listen, man, we're Mississippi State. We've had this great tragedy, obviously, rest in peace, Mike Leach. And, why don't you come back and you can be our quarterback coach? You can be our, passing game coordinator. You could be because obviously they have a huge trust there. And does that make a little bit more urgency for San Diego State to maybe do some of those things quicker? I think that, so I think it's super interesting. And I think we definitely need to also mention the passing of Ronnie Hillman as we're ending this. I remember going to, obviously having a history about this, right? We talked about that with Brady, but just San Diego State was so bad for so long, and they hire Hoke and you kind of see signs of life and they're supposed to be better. I remember they played Washington State at the Sky Show. So it was, 50,000 plus people. And, Washington State wasn't very good, but still San Diego State never beat Pac-12 schools. And so it was like, okay, they should be able to compete. And it was one of the first, Washington State scored on like the first or second play. And it was just like, okay, here we go. It's the same old Aztecs. And Ronnie Hillman just took over, and just, Lindley had and they beat him handily. And I remember in our seats, Nick Bernardi, the coach who's now on staff, he came into the stands after there because I think his like now wife was sitting like right in front of us, and a couple of the other players right there, and you could just feel the like relief, the like we've been working our tails off for this. And Ronnie Hillman was such a big part of the teams that turned it around at San Diego State. He was so good, over 3,000 yards in only 2 seasons. Obviously a 3rd round pick, and had one, I think, great season, really, but it's 31, bro. I don't even really have words to even imagine 31, and so obviously we're, praying for his family and all of that. And, coupled with Gavin Escobar, it's just a really, really sobering reminder, as I tried to lead in with the article, there's more to life than football. And they brought in 18 human beings, and, just like Ronnie Hillman was brought in, and it's hard. There's just no other way to it. It just kind of puts everything into perspective. And I hope that we all get the opportunity over the holidays to kind of, be with our loved ones a little bit more and hug them a little bit tighter and be a little bit more present, because life is fleeting, and it's unfortunate that it takes things like this to give you that kind of a reminder.
I said when Gavin Escobar passed away that he was my first favorite Aztec football player. But, Ronnie Hillman was a guy who wowed me, as a football player. I started my MBA in fall of 2010 at San Diego State. And happens to be the first year I had season tickets. I joined my friend's family as part of their season ticket package. And that was the year that, Ronnie Hillman's, breakout, obviously. And he was just amazing. I couldn't believe I was watching this guy in person do what he was doing at San Diego State, Yeah, it's tough to lose both of those guys in a 3-month span. Both tragic events, very different, from a hiking accident to, a medical disease or a condition. it's tough, and especially around the holidays, you have to feel for, Ronnie's family, and it's still Gavin Escobar's family is grieving, and they'll be grieving, probably forever. It's since it was only a couple months ago, but it's hard. You have to, we get on message boards and we get on Twitter and we talk about, or we argue over, who should be fired, who should be the coach, who should be playing, who should be the quarterback. None of that stuff is really, at the end of the day, that important. It's fun to banter, but Aztec Nation unites when it comes to the human aspect of it, and it's tough. It really is.
No doubt. Well said.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed us talking to Brady Nassar, one of the newest Aztecs, in our discussion about the signing class and the Hawai'i Bowl. Thank you guys always for listening throughout the year, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays and a Happy New Year to y'all. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.